Alright, so today's subject is going to be discussing a number of training splits that you can use to train in the gym to supplement your martial arts training. I'm also going to talk about my own training split that I'm currently using, and I'm going to also talk at the end of the video about how you can fit the weight training with your martial arts training as well. So the type of split you will choose is going to be based really on how much time you've got or how much time you want to commit to gym training. Obviously everybody has different commitments and different times available, so the 3 splits I'm going to give you are going to be a 3-day split, so you'll be in the gym 3 days per week, a 4-day split and a 6-day split. So I'll explain each one a little bit in detail, and you can obviously pick the one that is most suitable to your lifestyle. Number 1 is going to be a full body split. So as it says in the title, you train the full body in every session. So you're going to be doing 3 sessions per week. Say you could do 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on again. And you're going to train the entire body in each session. Now the exercises don't have to be the same in every session, but you do want to be covering the same muscle groups each time. So how can we structure that kind of a session? In the most basic terms, I like to think about a number of movement patterns that we should include, and they will be as follows: a squat pattern, a hip hinge, a horizontal press, a horizontal pull, a vertical press and a vertical pull at the most basic level. If we can cover those movements in each session, then we will be good for quite some time. So a quick explanation on some of those terms there. A squat pattern, obviously hopefully we know what a squat is. That can be a leg press, it can be a barbell squat, it could be a front squat, it could be a hack squat, it could be any squatting action. Okay, so where you're squatting to the floor basically, trying to get a good range of motion on that. A hip hinge is anything like a deadlift, so where you're bending at the hips, at the waist, and coming back up again. That could be a Romanian deadlift, a conventional deadlift, a sumo deadlift, stiff leg deadlift. It could even be a back extension on a hyperextension bench. It could be any motion that involves the hips, or you're breaking at the hips and then coming back up again, okay? A horizontal press would be something like a chest press or a bench press with a barbell or dumbbells or machine. It could be any variation of that movement. Okay, so even as I said, 3 days a week, you could be hitting 3 different movements and covering that same movement pattern each time. So on day 1, for example, we could have a chest press machine. Day 2 could be a dumbbell bench press maybe, or even a slight incline dumbbell bench press. And day 3 could be a barbell bench press. All right, so the exercise doesn't have to be the same, and in fact, slight variations on it throughout the week could be a good thing to avoid repetitive strain kind of injuries. A horizontal pull is the opposite. Okay, so instead of pressing forwards, you'll be pulling back like a row. So you could be doing a seated machine row, a barbell row, a cable row, dumbbell rows with one arm at a time. Anything where you're pulling from the front of the body to the back is going to be a horizontal row. We have an overhead press, would be like something like a shoulder press or a dumbbell seated shoulder press, barbell overhead press, anything where you're pressing from here over the top of your head. And finally, the vertical pull is like a pull-up or a lat pull-down kind of action. Okay, so by covering those movements, we have pressing forwards, pulling back, pushing up, pulling down. We have the hip hinge and we have a squat as well. So we'll be covering the entire body across one session, 3 times a week. The second split is going to be a 4-day-a-week split, and it's going to be upper, lower, upper, lower. So what that means is on day 1 we train the upper body, and day 2 is the lower body, and we repeat that 2 times a week. So in that case, I'll still try to keep those same movement patterns from the previous split. You know, the horizontal press, horizontal pull, and vertical press for the upper body. And obviously on the leg days we'll do a hip hinge and a squat. Okay, so in this way you could do slightly more volume for the upper body on the upper body days and a bit more volume on the lower body days for the lower body than you would do in a full body split. Okay, so now you're in the gym 4 days a week and you're hitting the upper body twice and the lower body twice. An example of a lower body session then maybe in that week could be a squat followed by a Romanian deadlift, hamstring curls, leg curls, could be seated or lying, or even a Nordic curl, like a bodyweight hamstring curl. You could then have a leg extension or a sissy squat kind of variation, and then you'd have covered the legs a little bit more with a few more movements than you would be able to on a full body session. Obviously the downside of a full body session is it's quite broad, and an upper lower split allows us to get a little bit more variety in our movements in each session. An example of an upper body session could be a bench press for your horizontal press, followed by a cable row for your horizontal row, an overhead press to cover your overhead press in action, your vertical press in action, and pull-ups for your vertical pull down, your vertical pull action. You could then add to this some work for maybe the biceps and triceps if you want to isolate them a little bit more. Maybe add some isolations for certain things that you want to bring up a little bit more, like in some weaker areas. And but you don't have to. You know, you can still stick to those 4 movements and have a very productive session. Now the third split is a split that I currently use at the moment, and it's a 6-day-a-week split. Okay, so you'd be in the gym 6 days per week. Obviously this is quite a little bit more time consuming, and you have to enjoy being in the gym to do that, right? So this would be a push, pull and legs split, okay? And you'd do that twice a week. So you'd rotate through a push-in session, a pull-in session and a leg session, and then you'd repeat it. So how I fit that into the week is I'll do the 3 sessions together. So for example, day 1 will be push, then pull, then legs, or in some variation of that order. 1 day off and then 3 back on again. So it's a 3 on, 1 off split. So now the split is categorized not into necessarily body parts but into actions. So we have push-in actions on the push day, and that would still be your pressing, both horizontal and vertical, but it could also include tricep press downs, another way to organise these sessions would be to have specific days that are more like strength focused. So say you had a full body, you was doing the full body 3-day split, you could have one day that was more focused on strength type movements where you're sort of sitting around the 5 rep range each set, you know, heavy weights and low reps. And then another day could be more power focused. So you could do the same movement patterns but where you're exploding with the weight. Maybe you know, plyometric type movements for squats or for pressing actions, that kind of thing. So you're kind of hitting different variables on different days. So how do we fit all of this in? Obviously the splits towards the end there, the 6-day split takes up a lot more time. So how do we fit this in with our martial arts or our karate training? The most important thing to consider when you're adding gym or weight training to your martial arts is recovery. If we don't recover enough, it's going to affect our training in both sides. So if we're not recovered for the martial arts session, it's going to affect our performance there. And if we're under recovered for the weight training, we're going to be making no progress and contributing to that overall fatigue. So if I train, for example, 2 times in one day, a weight training session and a martial arts session, I will split those up as far as I can as possible, you know, in time. So for example, I could do a weight training session in the morning, after a breakfast and consuming some calories and, you know, a second meal maybe. Then I'll have a good 5-6 hours, you know, between that first session and the martial arts session. And in that time, I'll be getting in more calories to sort of recover and fuel myself for the later session there. If you're doing the 3-day split, it's a little bit easier because obviously the 3 days on, you could maybe rest those days from your martial art and put the martial arts training around that. As you train more days in the gym, it becomes a little bit more tricky, and that's where we have to do maybe 2-a-day sort of sessions. In addition to all of this, of course, we need to still maintain mobility, because this is the argument a lot of the time, that people say that weight training causes you to be muscle bound or too heavy and stuff like this, which I disagree with anyway. But we need to maintain our mobility during this time, so you would also need to chuck in some stretching and some mobility work with your weight training sessions, or you can take care of that in your martial arts sessions. It just depends on how you want to put those in. If you're training correctly with a full range of motion anyway in the gym, it's going to improve your mobility rather than hinder it. So this video went on a little bit longer than I expected, but if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, put them down in the comments below and I'll try and get back to as many as I can. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe so you can see more of it, and I'll see you next time.